how do we transform the business to not just stay in the game, but actually start to win the game? And this is taking opportunities that are getting presented in times of huge complexity, uncertainty, and change. I spoke earlier to the Chief HR Operating Officer of ABN AMRO, and we were exploring how themes like sustainability, digitalization, these weren't just about making new products to actually stay competitive. There was whole new areas of the market that were opening up to take advantage of because of these themes. But to do that, you need to be able to reskill, upskill, and hire for new skills, and you need to do that at speed. And sort of kind of pulling on all of those themes, we're now going to move into taking this forward about what is HR's role in reinventing the future of your organization? And I don't know, there's no one better to talk to really than going to the heart of experimentation and playfulness. The person has even brought along Elmo today, and he can talk a bit about that, of how Elmo keeps him focused on the playfulness ahead. But we are going to meet Troels from Lego Group, and he's a senior HR director. And Lego have been on a really big journey around creating a product mindset to really kind of innovate and go in whole new directions in the marketplace where they haven't been before. And that's a whole mindset shift, not just a skill shift. And HR is playing such a crucial role in all of that. So let's learn a little bit more about what's happening at Lego, and then we can explore some of these hot topics with Troels. Troels, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me in. And yeah, I brought Elmo in here for two reasons. First of all, it really feels odd to be in a conference but be in a room by myself. So therefore, I felt at least with one body here, we could disagree amongst each other and see if that would create some dynamics. And then we also use Elmo in meetings to remind us, enough, let's move on. So in order to keep this relatively fast pace and also maybe allow for a bit of time for questions or for you interrogating me at the end, I thought that Elmo would be our friend. But other than that, a huge thank you and hello from Billund, Denmark, where the Lego Group is headquartered. I'm going to share with you my personal perspective on why HR is really the best place to be right now, maybe alongside with digital and product, in terms of really influencing the fast-paced changes that are happening in organizations right now. But of course, what I'm going to share is potentially right within the Lego Group context, or at least my personal part of that or my experience. So it could be that other people are sitting in total different environments, and this absolutely makes no sense. But I think that's the beauty of listening to each other and explore a few cases that hopefully something explore you, and you want to pick up the dialogue and continue afterwards, just find me on LinkedIn and get that conversation going. So just a few words about myself. I've had a full career in and outside the Lego Group in corporate HR, and I always thought myself as a corporate HR guy with a passion for coaching and numbers, so a bit of a hybrid. And always thought, why is it partners can't just make it work, the stuff we invent in corporate? Until someone got the brilliant idea to throw me into partnering 5 years ago and become the HR partner for the CFO of the Lego Group. And I actually started that 5-year stint now in partnering saying, oh, but I'm not really a partner, I'm the corporate guy. But now I actually found out that HR partnering is just as much fun as being in the ivory tower. And I actually think as HR professionals, we benefit so much from being able to cross-fertilize, both being close to the business and also being close to the centers of excellence. So I'm really enjoying myself as the partner of the CFO and looking after the 900 people organization globally that sits within, which is finance, legal, and strategy, and a lot of other great things. Yeah, and I happened to get a new CFO 18 months ago, and those of us that are in partnering, we know that getting a new boss and sitting on the HR LT and the CFO LT almost is the same as getting a new job, because of course with any C-suite leader we are supporting, that really defines who we are and what we do. I see myself as a curious person, so and that is really my core skill. So therefore I'm also super curious in terms of saying the situation we are in these years, what kind of opportunities, as Steve Jobs put it some years back in a graduation speech, what is the dent in the we want to bring. And I actually think in HR we have an opportunity to maybe not create a full dent in the universe, and at least make an impact and make a difference. So I think enough about me. Let's move into the things that I think are the most important ones in terms of HR transforming and influencing the future at work. So I mean, if we just, there are tons of different versions of what has really changed. So I don't think I should spend 20 minutes just laying out the world map. I mean, a few years ago, we talked about VUCA. Now we are way beyond that, I think. But just seen from the LEGO Group's perspective, a few of the things that are really the new realities, making it buckle up as a full organization as HR. I mean, there's, just to start from the top left corner, there's such a strong movement towards, it doesn't matter whether you are right, it is the best story that wins. So, I mean, just a few examples there, like if you take an iPhone and the visual identity of that product and compare that with the technical description of that product, it just immediately tells you probably wouldn't buy the technical descriptions, but we immediately have the affinity to actually buy the product because we know it and love it. We happened to bring a few small Lego statuettes to the Oscar night a few years ago, and seeing some of the Hollywood's biggest stars line up with a small Lego statuette, and the amount of power and publicity we got from that actually just was a reminder for us that it's not always a big marketing budget. Sometimes it's just the best story or the best idea. And some of our recent experiences in the Lego Group, I mean, you may know the show Lego Masters, where we have adult fans of Lego building fantastic creations prime time, and the amount of heart space that has created for us across the 30 or so countries that have run it so far. It actually started in Australia, fun fact. And the amount of, now it's cool for adults to also build with Lego bricks, whereas it was more perceived also as a children's toy some years ago, is another example of a story. And just the last one, you may or may not have seen Justin Trudeau's initial COVID video when he did that, talking about children and their responsibility, and he was kind enough to actually do that with Lego animation. So just another example of where we feel the best story win. Analogy is really a powerful one, both externally, but definitely also internally in organization. Then I think the whole digital journey that has been the topic of this conference, I mean, it's just going so fast, both from I mean, we work with young children, the builders, or young adults, the builders of tomorrow. They are natives in a world that the rest of us have to pick up on. So the speed of change that is coming from all of that, both internally and externally. And I think one powerful example from our world is the shift from Toys R Us, that was around a few years ago, to Amazon, and who's actually winning, and the speed in which the digital space has taken over also in the toy industry is just mind-blowing. We happen to be the most reputable brand in the world, according to surveys. So, of course, we also feel a huge responsibility to run with that, both from a sustainability and from really inspiring children around the world to imagine what kind of a future could we have. I think from a D&I perspective, there's so much changing organizations right now. I'm a huge fan of Verna Myers. I think she's there's a lot of good material out there. I think materials like the Just a Girl campaign, if you haven't seen that yet, you should consider to bring that into your organization. It's so powerful because the language we use is changing us so much, and definitely being in a European organization with a fairly strong representation of a certain culture has been a mind-blowing journey the last few years to try and open each other's eyes and realize that there's so much that we simply don't understand before we try approach that whole D&I agenda in a different way. And just to use a personal example, I actually for a few years started introducing myself with the image of a dinosaur, because I'm getting older. I've been around in the Lego Group forever, so I actually thought that was a fun way of presenting myself, until I realized, and luckily I realized it before someone made me aware. But when I'm 50, calling myself a dinosaur from having been here in 25 years, imagine what that tells to a 60-year-old colleague sitting next to me that has been around for 30 years. So I think there's so many micro exclusions happening every day. And the more we can get aware and the more we can get authentic about an organization. So that's another dimension of new realities that has just fundamentally shifted and, in my view, increased the impact that we can have as an HR organization. And last but definitely not least, coming through 2 years of COVID, what I call the big rethink. Some people like to call it the big resign. I don't really believe that's the case. I think that's also very much a term that is created for drama, but of course there are elements of that. But I think as much COVID has really given us the opportunity to rethink both how we run our business, but also what is really important individually and professionally. And then I guess what we're seeing right now in Europe with Russia's invasion is potentially the big setback. And we don't know what it is yet, but again, it's another dimension of reality we just need to deal with, and we need to internalize in whatever sort of shape that's going to influence us as a business and as human beings. And then just as a last piece of new reality in all of that, and that's why it's in the middle, we actually happen to grow by 50% over the last 2 years as a company. So we moved from approximately 40-ish to a 55 billion DKK business in the past 2 years, and experiencing that on the backbone of everything that is happening now is just, it's an amazing experience. We are also humble and grateful that we are still relevant for children during all the difficulties that is happening around the world. But of course, it also comes with a huge obligation and a huge need to dial up fast and really not get stuck in things that are holding us back. So I think that's probably, when I'm saying what is HR's role in creating future at work, it's a response to all of these things and probably 10 other things that are not even on this slide. So happy to take questions, but let's move on. So in that response to that new reality, I want to start out by saying I think fundamentally it's about three things, and then I'll offer a bit more perspective in a few minutes. So first of all, I think authenticity, the fact that we, each of us, are allowed to bring ourselves to work and not a certain role with a certain attire, a certain amount of hours a week, is just becoming so much more important. And that is both driven by the diverse and inclusive, but also the whole, I mean, few years back, we took for granted we had to get into the car, the train, and go to the office. And now there's just, I mean, so many things we thought weren't possible to do other than by being together physically, now is becoming increasingly a no-brainer. So the pace in which showing up authentically for who we are, and basically also realize why we even are spending our lives in the company we have chosen to join, is just become so much more important. And of course, there's a couple of different responses to that, but I think right now that is one of the key drivers of HR to make sure we move in that direction. And then, I mean, as already mentioned, digital is not somewhere out there we need to relate to at some point. It's here and now, it's every day, and it is gonna define the winners and losers in the business place in the coming years. And I mean, we were super lucky, but of course there was more than luck in there. We just were ready with a total new online business platform for our own Lego.com business literally a few months before COVID hit. And we have sometimes just paused and imagined, what if we hadn't done that work? What if we were sitting at the starting point of that journey at the time where all the online handling just exploded? So yes, it is luck, but of course it's also making sure that we make the investments rather earlier than later in terms of making sure we stay relevant, because we don't know what is going to happen next. And what is probably also going into this point, and I'm sure this is also one of the things that Natal would be curious about, is, I mean, that whole mindset around being product-led, about falling in love with the problem, about not immediately jumping to the activities, but actually what are the outcomes. That whole way of thinking and experimenting transcends so much beyond, and I hate to say it, just the digital products, but it really transcends through every aspect of how we run the business and what kind of decisions we make, and how much more playful we can actually be in the way we allocate resources, as an example. So again, it's very easy to talk about it high level and nobody would disagree. Of course, the difficulty comes, and we experience that every day, when all of a sudden a product-led organization meets the functional organization. How do we play that out? So there's no shortage of HR challenge there, but at the basic mindset of asking ourselves some of those fundamental questions is super healthy. And then last not least, and I know there's a cut over there, but I mean, every aspect of what we learned, at least people my age, what is right to do from an HR perspective, we just need to rethink. I'm going to refer to a book in a few minutes that I think is a good trigger point for those kinds of thinkings. Of course, there are other books out there, but the basic idea is that everything we thought were right, from 9 boxes to, I mean, looking for culture fit, all of that fundamentally needs to be thought through. Doesn't mean we need to throw out everything and start over, but there's so many things we just need to challenge in terms of why are we even doing that. So basically, I think there's no better time to be in HR because it's super challenging, it's scary, and back to the dent in the universe. I guess that's why we even bother. Yeah. So just a few things that, at least in the Lego Group context, back to my opening in terms of saying this may not be the magic formula everywhere, but at least when I'm thinking back, what has brought us in a fairly good place from a people perspective, I feel there are 2 or 3 things that I would like to carry forward. And I think the first one is really to be sharp on how can we help everybody in the organization create the emotional hook in terms of why am I even here? What is the greater good that I'm playing a part of? And whether that's starting with the UN sustainable goals. Of course, there's one in there about learning, which I'm hugely passionate about, but there are other things in there that I find relevant, or whether it's about our ultimate mission as a company to help establish a global force for innovating learning through play, which is such a powerful challenge to the way we develop and educate, or whether it's something else. I mean, we need, as an organization, more than ever, to create that emotional hook and for our employees to understand, why do I even want to spend my life in this organization? And then the other element that has really influenced me a lot is, I guess it is science around oxytocin and what really creates positive energy in our brains. And I know we have said it for a couple of years, but this whole idea about building on strength and building on positive energy rather than run by all the performance metrics and all the limitations and all the structural way of running organizations. There's so much more. And again, it can never be black and white and only the positive reinforcement, but there's so much power and energy to be released in an organization from actually do more of that positive peer coaching and helping each other succeed, rather than compete for an idea that there's only so many promotions, so therefore I need to look better compared to my colleagues, or whatever was kind of the thinking of the past. So this whole idea about how do we actually create more energy in our organization by learning our leaders and learning our colleagues to take care of each other, rather than only be a tough neck business. There's so much value from that. One of the things that we did a few years ago was actually to throw everything we had cherished around leadership out of the window and start fresh. So we actually asked ourselves, what is the leadership role? How do we define leadership in the Lego Group going forward? And what was hugely discomforting was that we didn't choose the usual suspects to sit down in a room and define, oh, this is how leadership look like. Rather, we pulled a working group representing all different kinds of employees across all the different skylines of the organization, and put them together and said, so how should we define leadership going forward? And we ended up with what we call the leadership playground, which of course refers back to the business we are in, but it's actually helpful in a number of ways, because we defined a few behaviors that we basically want everybody, so not just people leaders, but basically everybody in the organization. So we say everybody is a leader everybody has a responsibility to take leadership of the task, the project, the assignment, the outcome they are after. And fundamentally, we want 3 values to be, or behaviors to be lived out. So we want all of us to be curious, to be brave, and to be focused in stepping into the leadership playground. So that has kind of become our leadership model, and there's been so much energy coming out of that. So back to the energy burst of saying it's not a role, it's actually something we want everybody to do when they show up online and physically at work. But then the other part of it is the metaphor around the playground, because the playground is about going in there. You don't join a playground by sitting on the fence and commenting on what other thing people do right or do wrong. You step into the playground with a care for each other, but you also step in there to get grass on your knee and potentially a little bruise, and explore in whatever way makes sense to you. So that has really helped us also from a visual, from a metaphorical perspective, to create that shift in the mindset of our employees that leadership is not for somebody else, or I should sit around and wait for somebody to make decisions. Rather, I need to step into the playground and do my part. So that's definitely something where we in HR has had a huge role. Of course, we can't own it on our own, but we have a huge role in actually enabling it and making sure that mindset in terms of behavior is happening. Then the book I wanted to refer to is The 9 Lies About Work. I don't want to go into it in detail, but it basically challenges us on some of the logics that we thought were the right ones. So I also took my CFO LT through this book. I gave it to them, and they all read it, and we had a conversation about it. And going into a finance LT and saying, it's not about planning and strategy. It's not about planning. It's about best intelligence wins rather than best planned wins, is actually a challenging moment, because they're saying, what do you mean? Are you true? Are you drunk? What happened? But actually having that conversation about how do we enable the business rather than having multi-year business plans and drill down budgets, we need to think about how we run the business in a total different way. And there's some other interesting things in here, like for instance, people need feedback, which is actually not what we need. We need attention, and one way of getting attention is feedback, but feedback in itself is not the magic formula. Rather, it's actually giving each other the attention and the space we need. I want to move forward from that, again, in the interest of time. So the last 2 slides, just to summarize, what do I think we can do about it? What's our role in shaping the future of work? Back to the point about the starting with the point 2, the company purpose, making that real and compelling, not something on a slide, but something that everybody can relate to. Turn that into our personal, why do I even show up at work? So for instance, we've done a lot of purpose to impact work with the Core Institute, which is to a lot of colleagues a wake-up moment in terms of saying, what is it really that I want to do in my professional life and my private life? Back to the point about the oxytocin, releasing some of the positive energy, reinventing our approach to leadership. There's so much leadership thinking that is legacy that we can challenge, reinvent the way we learn. We thought, at least in my world, we thought for many years it was about making more learning available and democratize it. Interesting thing is now that it is democratized and so many more opportunities are there to learn all the time. It's actually interesting that we are still sometimes struggling, whether it's workload or whether it's really understanding how do I internalize the learning and turn it into everyday work. There's so much open space in terms of how we actually get smarter faster, where I think the digital journey can help us on that journey, but the outcome is also to create much stronger learning habits and culture in organizations. And then last not least, challenge the way we used to think about HR, and simplify. There's so many things, at least in my business, that we have been accepting because we are doing that. And of course, we are an LT, we need to do this and that, to simply stop and ask ourselves, so why are we even doing this? What's the outcome? What's the benefit? Is this just to tick off the activity, or is it because it's really bringing unique value? And therefore, I thought I could try and end it by suggesting a few roles that we could actually take. And I just want to start by bringing the disclaimer, because I actually hate that everything has to be chief something officer in order to have any impacts now. So please don't see it in this slide. But I was still thinking, I think we need an HR to be head of corporate storytelling. I think there's so much value in telling the stories in the right way. So it's not about we need to do this and that, otherwise we are getting out of business. But there's so many playful metaphors and storytelling in there that we can utilize, like for instance the playground that we activated. Then I think we need to become the chief curiosity and learning habit officer with an emphasis on the curiosity. I think there's so much more experimentation and playfulness also from the product-led digital mindset that we can bring in and basically make our way of operating. Chief Simplicity Officer, I mean, I feel there's so much to gain if we get clear on scoping, clear on decision. I mean, sometimes what the business is from HR is to make decisions on their behalf and just be explicit. I'm making the decision on your behalf. If you violently disagree, come back to me. But otherwise, this is what we do, rather than make everything open space and open book. But of course, and really go with the minimum viable product and try to avoid getting anything more complicated than it needs to be. But again, it's super easy to say. Of course, the trick is doing it. Inclusion and authenticity. I deliberately put authenticity in there because I think that is the outcome of diversity and inclusion, is that there is a trusted sense of belonging space where we can be ourselves and contribute. And we can't dictate the exact journey because it's very much an individual journey for each individual organization, but we can insist on people going on that journey. And I think we are learning that as a business right now, that it's not good enough as a senior leader to say, yeah, but I'm in Denmark and my team are Danes, so it's not really relevant for me. It's relevant for everybody to open our eyes. And last not least, there's something about human ambition, I think, in HR, and again, it's black and white, but I think sometimes our biggest mistake is we let things play out for too long because we sort of get used to that team not really functioning over there, and maybe it'll get better over time. And deep dive, we know that team, if it gets better, it's because the team has learned to cope with a leader that is mediocre from a people leadership perspective. So I think if anything, we should also translate that faster pace to becoming slightly more impatient with things that from an organization, from a leadership standpoint, from a value standpoint, are unsustainable. I think those were
Excellent.
A lot of words. So back to you, Natalia, and I hope some of it made a little sense.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love the, hang on, I'm just, can hear a little bit of feedback there. I love the new names for HR, or the new roles. So I was actually just about to put something comment, but particularly, so the head of simplification, or to simplify the complex. It's a really big theme at the moment. And I saw some really nice things around how actually a great employee experience is actually is to make work easy to get done, to kind of take out the complexity and so when people turn up to work, they feel like it's easy, it's, as you said, it's playful, and we want to be here, and we're not sort of bogged down with all these problems and these kind of burdenous tasks to do. And I think there's a big theme there for HR, because if we think about some of the logic that you're saying we need to let go of, traditionally we kind of introduced processes and things to get done, didn't we, for people? So we maybe added to the complexity rather than simplified it. Do you, what's your, because I really like that point as well about how you needed to let go of traditional HR logic. Can you give me an example, Troels, of what kind of logic you've had to let go of over these last few years?
Yeah, I mean, the 9-box grid that was introduced by GE and worked well for them, and we all adopted, basically, at least from my experience, turned it into a huge exercise that at the end of the day, when we had to look for the right talent for the right job, we didn't look into that anyway. So I think putting a label on people that you have this or this much potential, back to the 9 lies about work, it's about momentum. Even the person with the biggest runway in the organization can get bogged down if deployed in the wrong way in the wrong team. So getting our leaders to think about it, what is the momentum of learning and development around this individual, and having conversations about that rather than once a year say, oh, you're great, but you're not extraordinary. It brings nothing.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example, actually. I, in previous roles, ran these huge sessions around 9-box grids, and then we didn't use the data in the way that we should have anyway. And it was about the conversation, wasn't it? And about what can leaders do to develop their people. It's a really great point. We've got a couple of questions that have come in that I'd love to just go to. One is about authenticity, because you mentioned that. And so I know we're kind of running out of time, but if you could just quickly let us know, how do you help employees be authentic at work and sort of get the message across that you are supporting their actual development? So what's your sort of hints and tips there? How do we create this sort of authentic kind of environment in the workplace?
Yeah, but I think just 3 things super quick. I mean, it really starts with trust. It starts by accepting that we are all imperfect and we make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we learn from it. And again, it's so easy to say, but it's the whole environment. It's the whole vibe when you step in the door. It also means the room for leadership that is kind of trained in a different way needs to be little or zero, because it only takes one leader to kind of break that idea about we are really in it together. And just the last point, the whole idea about helping people to say, what is my unique contribution? What is my superpower? What is my purpose, both professionally and personally? It definitely is a huge leverage point for allowing people to show up in a different way at work. So it's hard to say it's one little thing, but I think it's a combination of many cultural aspects that makes the difference.
Definitely. Excellent. Well, it's been fabulous to hear your insights today. And Elmo has kept us on track. So a little wave to Elmo again. Have a great day, Troels, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Natalpa.
Excellent. Great. So we